It seems like only yesterday that Democrat Congresswoman Janelle Bynum flipped Oregon's 5th congressional district in 2024, defeating now Labor Secretary Lori Chavez-DeRemer. Recently, Bynum, an engineer and business owner, has been vocal about the immigration and customs enforcement raids in America, especially after one of her constituents, an American citizen, was apprehended and detained on his way to work. He was later released. Congresswoman Janelle Bynum here to talk about that case, the immigration crackdown in general, and the government shutdown. Congresswoman Bynum, thanks for coming back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
My pleasure.
Well, the case I just mentioned involves a 46-year-old man named Frank Miranda. He lives in Milwaukee, which is in your district, and was born in California. What do you know about his situation, and what concerns you most about it?
Well, it's clearly a case of body snatching, and the president tried that back here in 2020. I sued him on that, and we won. And we know that this is a form of terrorism. It's pitting Americans against Americans, and that is simply un-American. I feel really bad that Mr. Miranda experienced that, and we're going to continue standing up and fighting against this type of body snatching and terrorism in our communities.
In your statement at the time, you called for a fundamental change to this administration's approach to immigration. In your view, what would that look like?
Well, right now he's imposing a dragnet. Just anybody and everybody, whenever, ICE or Homeland Security wants to pick somebody up, they can. And it's without any sort of recourse. And that, again, is un-American. People have the right to understand what they're being charged with. They have a right to understand why they're even being stopped. They have a right not to say anything, to not self-incriminate. We have rights here, and those need to be respected, and we have to stand up for that. This administration has a clear guidebook, which is the Constitution, on how to act, and they need to follow it.
Bottom line, shouldn't illegal immigrants be deported? I know in Mr. Miranda's case, he's an American citizen, so it doesn't apply to him, but should not illegal immigrants be identified and deported?
Let's not take the bait here, Ken. This is an American citizen with every right to be on the street, to walk freely. And if we start mixing people up just based on the way that they look, we are really, really, really in a bad position. I think that's what the country is realizing, that this strategy that the president is employing is based on race. It's not based on any real characteristics of someone who might be a criminal or someone who might be here illegally. So let's not take the bait. Mr. Miranda was here freely as an American citizen and should not have been kidnapped.
How do you think this case is going to play out? As far as I know, he is suing because of this.
Well, our justice system is based on a system of your peers determining whether something happened or didn't happen or had a reasonable belief of happening. And I believe that he will be successful. People are not going to stand by idly and allow their country to descend into disarray. Right now, we're seeing a free fall, but we're also seeing people stand up. And that's what I'm most proud of here in Oregon and around the country. I think he'll be successful, but it also depends on what questions are asked. The most important thing is that we do not allow people to be kidnapped. That is fundamental to American values. You should be able to walk freely and move freely about the country as an American citizen who has done nothing wrong.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals still considering whether National Guard troops can be deployed here to Portland. That would overturn federal Judge Karen Immergut's temporary restraining order against deployment. What do you think of President Trump potentially sending troops to American cities, including Portland?
Well, we didn't ask for it, and we didn't need it. And again, this is President Trump's attempt to not run us our money. He owes Oregon and he owes states money. He canceled our projects for 2025. He is holding up the budget. He is making sure that the money that we have requested and were granted for roads, for election systems, for water systems, poof, gone. So we have mayors and city councilors and county commissioners wondering how they're going to finish their projects. Instead, what he's doing is trying to create some sort of reason to deny us what we are rightfully due. This National Guard deployment is just a sideshow.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was in Portland recently at the ICE facility. Afterwards, she said our public officials were lying about the relatively calm conditions outside the ICE facility. They do have some problems there, but not to the point where many people think the National Guard should be brought in. How did those comments from Kristi Noem hit you?
I have a 15-year-old son, and the conversation I've been having with him is, son, dishonesty is a choice. And being honest is a choice. And if you're dishonest too much, it becomes a habit. And I think that's where Secretary Noem is. She was dishonest about what she saw. She was dishonest about the conditions on the ground. And from my thoughts, I'm trying to figure out, I need to invite my colleagues who have gone on the air and have professed that we're having 50 murders a night, or we're having 50 of something a night, some bad things happening in Portland, which is simply not true. Portland is a major city. We have our issues, but we certainly don't have the characterization that Noem and her administration have. So I want to invite them to the Old Spaghetti Factory down on the waterfront for an old spaghetti dinner so that they can walk through and they can see what the ICE facility looks like, because what they're projecting about Portland simply isn't true. Liar, liar, pants on fire.
We're going into the third week of the government shutdown now. Republicans blame the Democrats are blaming Republicans. Meanwhile, thousands of government workers are either getting laid off or aren't getting paid right now. How is the shutdown affecting your district?
So we had our 20th town hall just the other night. Over 13,000 people participated. And one thing that they told me was that at least 40% of them were being affected by this shutdown. Republicans control the House, they control the Senate, and they control the presidency. Speaker Johnson admitted with his own two lips that he didn't have a strategy. He has repeatedly not called for votes. He knows that we've only passed 3 spending bills and we need to pass 12. He knows he has not done the work. I stand ready to go back to D.C. to make sure that we are voting on the things that we're standing up for, which is health care for Americans, and anything short of that is a non-starter.
You asked that your congressional salary be withheld until the shutdown ends. Why'd you do that, and do you expect to get your money back at some time?
What's important here is that we stand with the American people. And as I told you, we've held town halls. We're standing up, we're writing letters, we're doing media interviews. We're trying to make sure, because what people ask me also on that town hall is, how do I know what to believe? And the most important thing right now is that you have elected officials that you can believe and trust. I stand with the residents of Congressional District 5, always have, always will, and I'll make sure that I continue fighting for them.
Really quickly, we've got about 30 seconds left, but I want to talk about the swearing in of Arizona Democrat Adelina Grijalva, whose vote in the House could be enough to force the release of the Epstein files. What's your opinion of Speaker Mike Johnson holding up swearing her in?
Mike Johnson told you he didn't have a strategy. And I believe that he's bowing to the demands and commands of President Trump, and he's not using the full authority of his office to do what is right. And one thing that I remember from my early freshman days is that my Republican colleagues said, we need a strong Democratic Party, just like we need anything else in this country. And I think it is important for us to stand up and call for her swearing in immediately. Speaker Johnson is shirking his duties, and that is un-American.
Congresswoman Janelle Bynum, thank you for coming back to Eye on Northwest Politics.
My pleasure.